What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. In today's episode, we are going to finally add our storage to the game. So if we come over here now, you'll see when we come up to our storage chest, we can open up. We have a large trunk with its own inventory system. Come over here and you pick up something and we can just drag and drop. Everything that we've worked on to this point leads up to this very moment. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by the patrons listed on the screen. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits such as early access to my videos, project downloads, as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community by joining my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation. So in the last episode, I had mentioned that I was having a little bit of difficulty with my process item here. We're in the inventory component. The process item function was returning false, even though it shouldn't have, when I was picking up a stack of items and not picking up the entire stack. So like the inventory was full, so I was only picking up a half a stack. It was returning false. The reason for that is because in my mind, when I was running this and calling this recursive call, I was thinking that it was like taking this true branch and just coming over here and plugging it back into the beginning, but that's not actually what it was doing. I was thinking by doing that, it was just coming through and it was calling the same function over again. But what it's doing is it's actually calling a separate instance of this function. So what's going on is, as it comes up here and hits this branch, it's calling a separate call to this function, and then it's actually returning true or false out of here. So it was returning true like it was supposed to, but the problem is I don't have a return node here at the end. And if I were to go add a return node right now, you can see it actually defaults to false. So by not having a return node here, it was sending out the default value for the return. So by taking this and hooking this up, this actually fixes the problem. However, this isn't how we're going to end up doing this. We're going to end up making a change here. So I'm going to disconnect this for right now. What we actually need to do is we need to change this because, like I said, when we come back through here, if we're only picking up a partial stack and we come down in here into the inventory full, so like if I only have enough space to pick up a half a stack, then there should only be a half a stack left in the world. The problem is we weren't updating the world item to reflect the new quantity. So by sending true or false here, we were leaving full quantity. So say the bread, I have the bread set to 4, a quantity of 4 that's in the world right now. So if I only pick up 2 of those and put them in the inventory because it's full, there should only be 2 left. But there was actually 4. So that was a way to cheat in the extra items. So we need to account for that. So we need to change the variable here, the not is hotbar. We need to change the output for the return. I'm going to change this to quantity, change this type to an integer, and I'm going to go ahead for now anyways, and I'm actually going to remove this drop item from the full inventory, and we need to take the item, and I'm just going to split the struct pin here. So now we just want to send out the quantity. I'm going to plug that into the return node there, and we'll probably end up doing some different functionality once the inventory is full, but for now this works for me. So we'll just punch the quantity out there. For the quantity here on the false, we just want to pull the quantity off of there, and I'm going to punch in a reroute node and take that, and I'm going to plug that right into the quantity there, and then just take the quantity from this and punch it in right there. So I'll go ahead and compile it. So now we need to make another change. Right now, the only other place we have this is in the BP world item. So let's head over to that blueprint now. Now that we're in the BP world item, all we need to do now, you can see it reflected, it shows the quantity. So now we just need to check for that. Right now, the return node on this interact function, it returns a Boolean we call succeed. We probably don't really need that. We're not really using that at this point, but I envision probably needing this down the road at some point. So I'm just going to leave it in there for now, but it doesn't really matter. We're not checking this true or false on this anywhere at this point. But I'm going to punch in a branch right here. So what we need to check is this quantity less than or equal to 0. If it is, then that means there's nothing left. We processed this item, there was no remaining quantity, so we just need to go ahead and destroy the actor. And since we're returning true, I'm going to succeed true, and then off the false. If not, then what we need to do is we need to take the, and I just noticed I misspelled this here. I'm going to take the quantity from the world item, and let's just go ahead and set it here. And we will just go ahead and set it to the return value of the process item. So that should be it for this one. So I'm going to leave this as a false succeed because we didn't fully interact with it, right? We're returning this. So whatever the case may be, I'm just going to go ahead and return false on that for now. And go ahead and save it. So let's just go ahead and let's jump over to the true first person character. All right, so now I want to go ahead and start working on the showing the storage inventory when we interact with some storage units. So I'm going to make a little bit of a change here. I'm going to take the open inventory, which is what we normally have. This is the input action. So when we press the tab key or whatever you have set up to open up your inventory, that's what this is right here. So I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to add a sequence to this. And on pressed, I'm going to add the sequence. Now I'm going to take all this stuff that it was hooked into. I'm going to actually add it to the sequence. So off of the then 0, the first thing we want to do when we open our player's inventory is we want to call this stuff in here. First thing, I'm going to come in here though, and I'm going to take this set focus. We don't really need this. I set this before, but I think just by having this here, we're setting the focus right here in widget to focus right there. So we don't really need this. I tested it. I don't see any adverse effects by not having that there. So I'm not going to do that. So this is really all I need for this center section right here is that. And then I'm going to take the open player inventory. I'm going to run it off of the then 1, so that way it just kind of looks like this. Now we need to add a functionality to open up the storage inventory. So what we need to do now, let's go ahead and jump over to the BI Interact HUD. So in here, what I need to do is I want to add a new function to this. Again, we're inside the BI Interact HUD, and the new function, I'm going to call this one Open Storage Inventory. And on this, I want an input of, I'm going to call this one name, or you can call it display name. I'm just going to name my name, and I'm going to bring it down to name right there. So name, type name, and go ahead and compile it. What this name is going to be is I want to be able to display the name of the storage unit in the HUD. So you'll see that in just a couple of minutes. So let's go ahead and jump back to the first person character. So now let's go ahead and open up the interfaces, and now you should see that open storage inventory function that we just created. So let's go ahead and create an implementation of that. I'm just going to drag it up here now and put it underneath the open inventory. So just like with the open inventory, I'm going to go ahead and add a sequence, and I'm going to plug that in right there. And the first thing we want to do in this is we're going to come up here and we're just going to plug right back into this. I could make a separate function for this, but there's really no need to. This is pretty small functionality right here. And if I end up coming up with something down the road where more than these two events need to use this functionality, then I will make a function out of it. But for now, this is fine. Otherwise, you know, like I said, you can make this a separate function and then just call the function as you wish. So, and then what we need to do now is we need to grab our primary HUD. I'm grabbing call to that, and now we need to be able to show the inventory there. So let's go ahead, before we jump into the actual HUD, let's go into the inventory window that we have that displayed. So go ahead and jump into your WEP inventory window. And the only thing we need to do in here is like I said, I want to be able to display the name up here for the storage unit. So instead of saying your items, I want to be able to change this to whatever I want to put in there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the text. I'm just going to select that. There it is. You can see the text right there. And I'm going to change this to is variable. I'm just going to call this one display name. So that way I know what it is. And one last thing I need to do, I want to come down here to under the font settings, and I want to set it to a center adjustment. Otherwise, it's going to be off to the left there the way it was set up. I want it to be centered to the text below it. So that's all we need to do from that. So go ahead and make sure you save that. And now let's go ahead and jump over to the WBP primary HUD. So now we need to build a function that we can call from the player character whenever we're opening up our storage. So let's add a new function here, hit the plus, and I'm going to call this one show storage inventory. Okay, and on this, let's go ahead and add an input of a name. I'm just going to call this name. You can call it display name, whatever you want to do, and make it of type name. And then go ahead and grab the second inventory window, pull it up here and grab a reference to that. And then let's just go set visibility. And then obviously we want to make it visible. So that's good there. And then from this, let's go ahead and I'm going to grab, you can pull off of this if you want to. I'm just going to grab another instance of the secondary inventory window. And let's go ahead and get what I call it, get display name. Right there, you can see we open up that variable. So now we're getting that variable display name, which is that text box. And from this, let's go set text. And we don't want to set the text tooltip, set text. And then just go ahead and plug that in. And now it calls for some text. So I'm just going to take the name variable here, plug it in. We're going to get a conversion to text, a name to text, just like that. So now it should set that for us. I'm going to put in a return node just so we can wrap up this function. All right, and that should be it for this function. So now we need to be able to remove this window when we close our inventory. So the way I'm doing that is I'm going to come over here now into, we're still in the primary HUD where the show player inventory function is being called. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and run a check on here. So drop in a branch, there it is, drop in a branch. And what we're going to check here is we need to check is the show inventory, what's coming in. I'm just going to type show inventory. If that is not, in other words, it's coming in as false. So we want the not here. So show inventory not false. So if these are false and we grab our secondary inventory window, let's get that and then go is visible. So is this coming in as false? Because remember, if it's coming in false, we're collapsing the window here for the player inventory. So if that's coming in false and the secondary window is visible, we need to go ahead and drop off this and do an and. So if both of these conditions are true, meaning this is false and this is true, punch it in here. So then I'm going to grab another reference to the secondary inventory window, drag off of here and go set visibility. And we're going to set this to collapsed. So go ahead and punch that into, plug that into the true here. And then I'm just going to hit the same. I'm just going to have one return node for all of this. So plug that all in together like this. And that is it. So now that should close our window when we are closing our inventory. So now let's go ahead and jump back into the true first person blueprint. So now that we got that function set up, we've come back here and the open storage inventory function or event that we have set up. We got the primary HUD here. So let's go ahead and drag off there and go show storage inventory. Plug that into the then one section. And this is looking for the name. So let's just go ahead and pull off the name right there. I'm just going to hook in a reroute node. And the last thing we need to do, since we're calling this separately, we still want to open up the player inventory. So we need to make a call to the open player inventory function. This is part of the reasons why we came down and we made a separate event for this. Now, this is actually the original open player inventory here where it updates the inventory HUD and shows the player inventory. We made this an interface call. We probably don't need to make that an interface call. I'm just going to leave it for now, but thinking down the road, I'm not sure if we're going to need this to be an interface or not, because we're not calling it anywhere other than from within here. But I'm going to leave it for now, but you probably don't need that at this current time. So now that we have that all set up, now we need to have an actual storage item to be able to open up and interact within the world. So let's get that set up. Let's start this off by adding a new blueprint here. So I'm going to open up the content browser, and in the main content folder, I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder, and I'm just going to call this one storage. All right. And then inside the storage folder, I'm going to add a new blueprint. Let's go ahead and make it an actor class. I'm going to name this BP underscore main storage. Just like we did with the item, this is going to be the grandparent of everything. We're just going to keep this as main. We're just going to add default things in this particular blueprint that we want propagated all the way down to all of its children. So this will be the primary storage. We may have multiple different types of storage, like your backpacks and your normal lockers and sheds and things like that require, or NPCs that will have a little bit of different functionality, kind of like with our different types of items. So we want a parent that's just going to be a generic class that has everything that all the children, every single children will need to have, or at least has access to, and then we can refine all the children down the road. So we got the BP main storage, so let's go ahead and open that up and make some changes there. So down the road, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of different things that we're going to have to put in here. But we've only got a few things that we need to add into this current implementation of the main storage. So let's go ahead and add a new component. Whenever I create a new blueprint, especially something that's going to be placed in the world, I generally like to add a scene component, just a regular old scene component. I'm going to call this root, and I take this and I drop it onto as the default root. And the reason for that is if we come back here, you can see we got a default sphere or whatever we're going to have in here. So if we drop it in the world, we're going to have this big old sphere or whatever showing in the world, and I don't like that. So I take this and I just drop it onto the default scene root. It becomes the new root. Come back in here and that's gone. So we don't have anything in there. So this just becomes our new root. So with that, now let's go ahead and add a static mesh, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it as static mesh. And then the other component we need to do is, well, we need to do the AC inventory component. So go ahead and drop that in there. I'm just going to name mine inventory, and that's all we need for that. If we come up here to the class settings, select your class settings, and now we need to add an interface here. So add an interface, and we're going to do the BI interactable. And then now we're going to have access to those interface calls. So double click the set look at, and let's go ahead and set a couple things in here. So let's grab our static mesh. And from here, we need to go set render custom depth. Remember, this is what's going to set the outline for the item when we're looking at it. So plug that in and then hook up the Boolean there. And then right click on the interact text and let's go promote the variable. And then on the name, go ahead and right click on that one, promote the variable. I'm going to name this one display name. And then that's good for that one. So let's go ahead and select the static mesh here in the components list. We need to come down here to this and to the collision presets. We want to actually set a custom. And now we need to set this one to block the interactable. If we don't do this, then it's never going to notice it. The custom depth, it will never register that. So let's go ahead and compile and save that. We do have access to the interact, but we don't need to do any implementation of that in this current setup here, because again, this is a parent. We don't need to interact with the parent. And then one last thing I want to do, I think it's here in the class settings again. Go up here and let's set this to generate an abstract class. This is supposed to prevent this main storage blueprint from being used in the world. So we just want to set this as abstract, because abstract means it's going to define our children. It's not meant for anything other than that. All right, so go ahead and make sure you compile it and save it. And let's go ahead and create a child storage unit. Go ahead and open up your content drawer and right click on the BP main storage. And let's create a child blueprint of this. And I'm going to call this one BP underscore big trunk underscore storage. And let's go ahead and open this up. Inside the event graph, we're not going to worry about any of this right now, but let's go ahead and set some defaults. Let's go ahead and with class defaults selected up there, the interact text, I went ahead and set the defaults in the parent and the interact text defaults to saying open, which is fine because what we want to do when we interact with these is open them. So that's fine. And then display name, I have generically just set up as storage. Just that way it shows something other than the word none when we open it up in the primary HUD. But this one, I'm going to call this one large trunk. Head over here to the interfaces, and I'm going to double click interact, and let's go ahead and implement this function here. Now the inventory coming in, this was originally written when we wrote this interact. We can pass something to here if we want to, but we're not going to need it for the storage unit. This is when we're picking up items in the world. When we interact with the items in the world, this is the inventory that is interacting, which is the player's inventory. So we don't need that here. Let's go ahead and grab a reference to get player character, and from the player character we want to update inventory HUD. All right, so we want to update our inventory, which is the inventory component we have here. So let's grab that and plug that in. So just like we do with the player's inventory, whenever we interact with it, in this case opening the inventory, we want to make sure that our inventory is completely updated within the HUD. And then off the player character again, let's go ahead and go open storage inventory, which is a function we just created just a few minutes ago, and go ahead and hook up the execution. And then again, the name we need to pass in here. Let's just go ahead. It's in our class default. You can't see it here unless you enable show inherited variables, which if we do that, then we can see our variables here. We've got a display name. Go ahead and do that. You can just right click in the graph and ask for the display name as well, and you can grab the variable that way. Go ahead and hook up the execution pins here to the return node, return success. Again, we probably don't need a success return on here, but we're going to do it anyways because we may need it down the line. So go ahead and compile and save it, and that should be about it. So now we need to get some static mesh to be able to show in the world. All right, so off camera, I usually try not to do too much off camera, but this is pretty standard stuff. I created a new folder inside the content folder, called it assets. And then I added 3 folders inside of assets, one materials, the other meshes, and the other textures. I've just imported a new mesh, which is provided by, all these meshes that we're gonna end up doing are going to be available for you guys to use in your own projects however you want. They're going to be CC0 license on them. However, a friend of the channel, Tentacle, he is the one who made these meshes. Today I'm only going to introduce you to one. He created a large trunk and a small trunk as well as a backpack, and he may create some stuff for us in the future. Or if you're part of the channel and you want to create some stuff to help out the channel and help out the videos that you feel like you want to let out, then come join the community, come talk to me over in the Discord channel. Otherwise, Tentacle made these particular ones that I'm going to show you today, and they will be available down in the description. You can grab them. Also down in the description will be a link to his ArtStation channel. So I suggest, go check him out, show a little bit of love for him making these meshes for us to be able to use. The material I ended up creating in Substance Painter for you to use. So I went ahead and here's the mesh with the material. I already created the material. I'll show you guys the material. It's real basic. I created the textures, imported all the textures and all that. So this is the trunk that he provided for us, and we'll be able to use it in the world. You'll get a little bit of sense of scale for it once we throw it in there in just a minute. So that's the trunk. We come over here. This is the material I created. Okay, we've got here some textures. They're just real standard material, real standard textures. Just make sure when you're importing these textures, if you end up using this, make sure you set them properly. What I mean by that is it generally imports them with RGB. We don't want them to be RGB. The first one here, the base color, needs to be RGB. The normal needs to make sure it's set up as a normal. And then right here we've got this one, which is using all 3 channels of the texture to be able to represent the roughness, the ambient occlusion, and metallic. So this is how it's set up here. For this one, if you look at the name of this texture sample, you can see in the name it's called occlusion, roughness, and metallic. That's how it goes down. So the red channel is occlusion, the green channel is roughness, and the blue channel is metallic. So just hook those up here. You can see there, red to ambient, green to roughness, and then the blue goes into the metallic. So just set that up like this. This is just real basic material, and then go ahead and apply that material to your trunk. And then let's go ahead and jump back into the BP Big Trunk Storage Blueprint. All right, so now all we need to do is go ahead and come over to the static mesh and set the default mesh here to be the trunk that we have there. Throw that in the static mesh, compile it, save it, and that should be all we need to do to be able to make this a functional blueprint. So come out here now to the test open world and open up your content browser. Wherever you have your meshes saved, I'm going to take out the trunk and I'm just going to come out here and set it into the world, make a little bit of a rotation to it, and that should be it. So let's go ahead, make sure you go ahead and save this. And you can come back in here into the trunk storage and set your inventory size. Remember, it defaults to 10, at least the way I have it set up. I'm just going to do 7 here so you can see that we can make a difference, or that the inventory is working properly. So let's go ahead and cross our fingers. Everything should just work. All right, so some of you probably noticed that I just went ahead and I dropped the static mesh straight into the world instead of the blueprint. So if you notice that, or you did that, then make sure you put the blueprint into the world, or you're going to spend the next 10 minutes trying to figure out why you can't interact with the object. So now that we come in here, we look at it, there we go. We got the outline just like the rest of it. And if we press E to interact with it, there we go. You can see we got large trunk up here. We got the 7 inventory slots that we changed it to. So the way we set this up, like I've been saying from the beginning, the way we set this up is now we can just drop that. We should be able to just drop the inventory component on anything and it should just work. So that's all we did. We didn't do, other than making the correction with the quantity and all that at the very beginning of this episode, we didn't do anything to this inventory component to except this storage. So this is just how it's been, how we built it. So now if we come over here and we pick this up and open the storage back open, we can just take this and there we go. We can drop it in there, press just regular tab. You can see your items. We open up the storage. There we go. It's in there. Drop that, come over here and get the red berries, open up the chest. There we go. We can take this and we can drop the berries there. We can still use items from our trunk asset here, open it back up, and there we go. You can see everything's all set up just like we intended. So that was the purpose of all this, everything built up to this, and hopefully you got a good grasp of what's going on. There's one last thing that I want to do before we wrap up this episode. So let's go ahead and jump back out of here and I'll show you what we want to do. So now that we have a relatively well working inventory system, now I want to be able to take this. One thing I've always tried to show from the beginning is being able to create things that are reusable. So now this inventory system in its base form is reusable. Now we can start customizing it to whatever game that we're going to build, but it's relatively just straightforward. It's pretty simplistic in how it's implemented, but it's very versatile and can be used in many different projects. So with that, I want to be able to take this and I want to use this in its current form as a template. So I can just take this and add it to any other project and implement it however I see fit for that future project. So first thing I need to do is open up the content drawer here. I'm going to come up here real quick to my interfaces. These interfaces, I'm actually going to add a new folder and I'm just going to call this inventory, because since this is going into, this is good anyways, just to kind of categorize everything, but because this is going to be migrated into my custom or my starter template project, I want this to kind of be categorized differently in case I end up having other interfaces in the other projects. So I'm going to go ahead and move those here. And then now I'm just going to come down here and on the inventory folder, I want to implement everything within here. You can come in here and right click on the inventory component and it's going to get most things tied to this, but it's not going to get all the interfaces that it really kind of needs. So I'm going to right click on the folder inventory, select migrate. Now we're going to get a list of everything that's connected to this that's going to want to migrate. And generally speaking, everything's good. So we got our interfaces here. So those are good. Now remember, we had 3 interfaces, but one of them was for the widgets. This isn't going to bring the widgets over because, we don't want to implement. We might want to do different widgets in the future projects. All we want is things relative to this particular inventory. So these 2 interfaces are being called there. So I'm going to minimize that. And as far as the inventory goes, it's got the component, it's got the item, and then for the items, it comes down here. We got the base item, we got the world item. For this, I don't want to transfer the food over there, right? I just want the base setup. So that way, in a future project, if I drag and drop this into another project, then we can just essentially start from the bare minimums and just move everything over. So we don't need the food, so deselect that. We're going to keep the item outline. The starter content, you don't necessarily have to do this. We're using it in its default state. So if you don't do this, you're going to have to immediately set something up. So I'm just going to transfer this over with it as well. So either you can go into your base items and remove these generic shapes from their mesh. So if you don't want to migrate over, but I'm fine with it. It's only a couple meshes. It's going to be the cone and the cylinder and the basic wall texture. Not a big deal. And then click OK, and then decide where you want to send it to. For me, it's going to be my starter template project. If you haven't seen what I talked about with having a nice starter template project, then go check out the video, maybe up there in the cards somewhere right now. You can go check that out. It's a good idea to have. You know, you're going to be making a bunch of different games and practicing and doing all these things. So why rebuild? If you've got a perfectly operating inventory system, then save it, move it over, right? If I make any changes to this that I think would be a good functionality for every single project moving down the road, then I'll update it. But right now, I think this is pretty standard. It's pretty basic, you know, to where it's versatile enough to be able to be used in almost any type of project and customized any way that you want. So it's a good foundation. So migrate it, do something with it, and that way, so now anything we do to in our main project will have the original functionality saved somewhere else. So that's it. Again, I want to say thank you to Tentacle for supporting the channel and helping me out making those meshes for us. And go check out his ArtStation webpage. Go check that out, see his work, drop him a line if you want to come over and say thank you to him in person. He's over in our Discord channel. Links down in the description for that. So come hang out, join the community, say hi, say thanks, whatever the case may be. And until the next episode, peace.